You've been here before. You know you have. That sinking feeling in your stomach when you realize you just did it again. The same mistake. The same pattern. Maybe it's chasing a trade you knew you shouldn't take. Maybe it's holding on too long when you knew you should exit. Maybe it's risking too much because this time felt different. But whatever it is, it's familiar. Painfully familiar. And the worst part isn't the money you lost. The worst part is that you saw it happening. Some part of you knew, even as you were doing it, that you'd been down this exact road before, that you'd promised yourself you wouldn't do this again, that you'd learned this lesson already, and yet, here you are. Again. If you're feeling that right now, if that description touches something raw in you, then what we're going to talk about tonight matters more than any strategy or technique you'll ever learn. Because we're going to explore why you keep repeating the same mistakes. Not the surface reasons, not the excuses you tell yourself, but the real psychological machinery underneath that keeps pulling you back into the same patterns no matter how much you know better. And more importantly, we're going to talk about what it actually takes to break free from those patterns. Not through willpower or determination or trying harder, but through understanding something fundamental about how your mind works and why it keeps sabotaging what you consciously want. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Your repeated mistakes aren't actually mistakes. Not in the way you think they are. A mistake is when you don't know better and you get something wrong. But you do know better. You've known better for a while now. You've lost money on this pattern before. You've felt this regret before. You've had this exact conversation with yourself before. So, calling it a mistake is actually letting yourself off the hook. Because mistakes are accidents. What you're doing isn't an accident. It's a pattern. And patterns exist for a reason. This is the first thing we need to understand. Your trading behaviors, even the destructive ones, are serving some purpose in your psychology. They're meeting some need or protecting you from something or maintaining some equilibrium that your mind has decided is necessary. And until you understand what purpose they're serving, you can't change them. You can know they're destructive. You can hate them. You can promise yourself 1,000 times you'll stop. But if they're serving a psychological function you haven't identified and addressed, they'll keep coming back. Because your unconscious mind doesn't care about your trading account. It cares about whatever it thinks it's protecting by maintaining these patterns. So let's dig into this. Let's talk about what's really happening when you repeat the same mistake for the 10th or 20th or 100th time. And I want you to really pay attention to your own experience as we go through this, because somewhere in what I'm about to say, you're going to recognize yourself. You're going to feel that uncomfortable flash of recognition where you realize, I'm describing something you do. And when that happens, don't look away from it. That's where the work is. The most common pattern I see is what I call the hope-fear cycle. It works like this. You start with hope. Maybe you've had some good trades. Maybe you just feel confident today. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you figured something out. And in that state of hope, you take a trade. But the moment that trade goes against you, even slightly, something shifts. The hope drains away and it's replaced by fear. Not just fear of losing money. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being exposed as someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Fear of all the implications that this loss seems to carry. And in that fear state, you make a decision. Maybe you exit too early. Maybe you hold on too long, hoping it will turn around. Maybe you add to a losing position, trying to average down. Whatever you do, it's driven by fear. And then, after the trade is over and the fear subsides, you look back and you see clearly what you should have done. You see that you panicked. You see that you acted emotionally. And you promise yourself that next time will be different. Next time, you'll stay calm. Next time, you'll follow your plan. And you genuinely believe it. Because right now, outside of the fear, it seems so obvious. But then the next trade comes, and the hope returns, and the cycle starts again. What's happening here isn't a knowledge problem. You know what you should do. What's happening is that your emotional state is overriding your knowledge. And the reason it keeps happening is that you haven't learned how to stay connected to what you know when your emotional state changes. You think the problem is the fear, but the actual problem is that you believe your fear. You believe that when you feel afraid, you should act on that fear. You believe that the intensity of the emotion is evidence that you need to do something, and so you do. You act, and you repeat the pattern. Here's what makes this so difficult to break. The cycle reinforces itself. Every time you act from fear and something bad happens, it confirms to your mind that the fear was justified. Even if what went wrong was caused by your fearful action, your mind registers it as proof that you are right to be afraid. And every time you act from hope and something good happens, it confirms that the hope was justified. So both states feel validated. Both states feel real, and you stay trapped in the oscillation between them, never quite seeing that the real problem isn't the emotions themselves, but the fact that you're letting them run the show. But let me go deeper, because there's another layer here that most traders never see. Underneath the hope-fear cycle, there's usually something else. There is a belief about yourself that you're trying to prove or disprove through your trading. And this belief is so fundamental to how you see yourself that your mind will sacrifice your trading account to maintain or challenge it. Let me give you an example. Some traders have an underlying belief that they're not good enough, that they don't deserve success, that they're fundamentally flawed in some way. And when these traders start to succeed, when things start to go well, something unconscious happens. Their mind can't reconcile the success with the belief, and so they sabotage. They make an impulsive trade. They break their rules. They find a way to lose what they've gained. Not consciously. They don't want this. But unconsciously, the loss feels more comfortable than the success because the loss confirms what they already believe about themselves. Other traders have the opposite pattern. They have an unconscious belief that they're special, that they're smarter than other people, that they should be able to figure this out faster or better than everyone else. And when they make mistakes, when they lose money, it doesn't compute. It doesn't fit with their... And so, instead of learning from the mistake, they externalize it. The market was irrational. The setup was wrong. Something unusual happened. They find a way to maintain their belief that they're special by making the mistake not really their fault. And because they can't own the mistake, they can't learn from it. And so they repeat it over and over, each time finding a new explanation for why it wasn't really their responsibility. Do you see what's happening in both cases? The repeated mistake isn't random. It's purposeful. It's maintaining a self-concept that feels more important to the unconscious mind than making money. And until you bring this into awareness, until you see what belief you're protecting or proving, you can't change the pattern. Because you're not fighting a bad habit. You're fighting an identity. And identity always wins. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking about your specific repeated mistake, and you're wondering how it fits into what I'm describing. So, let me talk about some common patterns and what they're usually protecting. If you keep overtrading, if you keep taking trades you know you shouldn't take, you're usually trying to avoid something. Boredom, anxiety, the discomfort of just sitting and waiting. Overtrading isn't about wanting more money. It's about using action to manage uncomfortable emotions. It's a form of self-medication, and like any medication, the relief is temporary. The discomfort comes back, and you need another hit, another trade, and the pattern continues. If you keep holding losers too long, if you keep hoping they'll turn around when you know you should cut them, you're usually avoiding the finality of being wrong. As long as the position is open, you haven't officially failed. You're still in the game. There's still hope. But the moment you close it for a loss, you have to face the reality that you were wrong. And for some people, that feeling is so intolerable that they'll watch a small loss become a devastating loss just to avoid experiencing it. They'd rather lose everything than admit they were wrong. Because being wrong feels like being worthless. And worthlessness is the one feeling they'll do anything to avoid. If you keep risking too much, If you keep putting on position sizes that are too large for your account, you're usually trying to prove something. You're trying to make up for lost time. You're trying to show yourself or someone else that you can do this. You're trying to get back to even or get rich quick, or finally have the breakthrough that validates all the time and money you've invested. The oversized risk isn't about the trade. It's about what the win would mean. It's about the story it would let you tell yourself about who you are. And when you need a trade to mean something beyond what it actually is, you're not trading anymore. You're gambling with your self-worth. I could go on. There are dozens of these patterns, but they all have the same structure. A repeated behavior that seems irrational on the surface, but is actually serving a psychological function underneath. And the reason you can't stop the behavior through knowledge or discipline or promises is that you're treating the symptom rather than the cause. You're trying to change the behavior without addressing the need it's meeting. And that never works. Not sustainably. So, what does work? How do you actually break these patterns? The first step is recognition, not judgment, not shame, just clear, honest recognition of what you're doing and when you're doing it. Most traders are so consumed by the emotions in the moment that they don't even realize they're in a pattern until it's over. They're inside the experience, swept up in it, and only afterwards do they look back and see what happened. But if you can learn to catch yourself in the moment, if you can recognize, oh, I'm doing that thing again, that recognition creates a tiny gap, a space between the trigger and the response. And in that space, choice becomes possible. But recognition alone isn't enough. Because once you recognize the pattern, your instinct will be to fight it, to try to force yourself to do something different, and force doesn't work with these patterns. Force just creates more internal conflict. You end up fighting yourself. One part of you trying to do the right thing, another part of you pulling toward the old pattern. And that fight is exhausting. It drains your mental energy. And eventually, the old pattern wins because it's backed by deeper, more powerful forces than your conscious willpower. So, instead of fighting, you need to understand. You need to get curious about what the pattern is giving you. What is it protecting you from? What need is it meeting? What would you have to feel or face or accept if you didn't do this anymore? And this requires real honesty. Not the kind of surface honesty where you admit you have a problem, but the deeper honesty where you look at what you're actually afraid of, what you're actually trying to avoid, what belief about yourself you're actually maintaining through this behavior. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you recognize that you keep revenge trading after losses. You take a loss, and almost immediately, you jump into another trade trying to make the money back. And you know this is destructive. You know you shouldn't do it. But you keep doing it anyway. So instead of just promising yourself you'll stop, you get curious. What are you feeling right after that loss? What's the actual emotional experience? For most people, it's a combination of anger and something else. Maybe shame, maybe fear, maybe a feeling of being diminished or exposed. And the revenge trade is an attempt to escape that feeling as quickly as possible. It's saying, I can't sit with this discomfort. I need to fix it right now. I need to prove that I'm not what that loss just made me feel like I am. Once you see that clearly, once you understand that the revenge trade is an avoidance strategy, the question becomes, can you sit with the discomfort? Can you let yourself feel the shame or the fear or the anger without immediately trying to make it go away? And this is where the real work is. Not in changing your trading behavior directly, but in increasing your capacity to be with uncomfortable emotions without needing to act on them. Because as long as you need to escape uncomfortable feelings immediately, you're going to keep using trading as an escape mechanism, and that means you're going to keep repeating the patterns. This is why understanding yourself is not optional in trading. It's not some soft skill that might be helpful. It's the core skill. Because trading will surface every unresolved issue you have, every fear, every insecurity, every way you avoid discomfort or seek validation or protect your ego. All of it will show up in your trading decisions. And if you don't do the internal work to understand and address these things, they'll control you. You'll be a puppet to your own psychology, endlessly repeating the same patterns and wondering why you can't seem to learn. Now, I want to talk about something that makes this even more complicated. It's the fact that sometimes your repeated mistakes actually work. Sometimes you overtrade and make money. Sometimes you hold a loser and it turns around. Sometimes you risk too much and hit it big. And when that happens, it doesn't break the pattern. It reinforces it, because your mind registers the win as proof that the behavior was right, even though you know intellectually that it was luck or randomness or an exception. Your emotional brain doesn't process it that way. Your emotional brain says, "See, this works. This is fine. This is fine. You are worried for nothing." And this intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful forms of conditioning that exists. It's why gambling is so addictive. It's why bad habits are so hard to break. And it's why you can know something is destructive and keep doing it anyway. Because sometimes it works. And that sometimes is enough to keep you hooked. This is where you have to develop something most traders never develop. You have to develop the ability to evaluate your decisions independently of outcomes. You have to be able to say, "That worked out, but it was still the wrong decision. That was still the pattern I'm trying to break." And you have to be able to feel genuinely bad about a win that came from a bad process. Most people can't do this. Most people let results dictate how they feel about their decisions. If it made money, it was good. If it lost money, it was bad. But that's giving away your power. That's letting randomness determine your and it guarantees you'll stay stuck in your patterns because you'll never consistently learn from them. The traders who actually break their patterns, they develop a different relationship with their decisions. They care more about their process than their results. Not because results don't matter, but because they understand that results are downstream of process. And they understand that if they can improve their process, if they can actually change their patterns, better results will eventually follow. But it doesn't work the other way. You can't get better results and hope your patterns fix themselves. The patterns have to change first. And that only happens when you care more about who you're being in the moment than what you're getting from the outcome. Let me tell you something else that might shift your perspective. Your repeated mistakes are actually trying to teach you something. They're not just punishments or failures. They're feedback. They're showing you where your weak points are, where your unresolved issues live, where you need to grow. And if you can stop seeing them as evidence that you're broken or inadequate and start seeing them as information about what needs attention, everything changes. Instead of beating yourself up every time you repeat a pattern, you can get curious. Interesting. I did it again. What was different about this time? What was I feeling? What was I trying to avoid or achieve? And over time, you start to map out the terrain of your own psychology. You start to see the conditions that pull you into old patterns. You start to understand your triggers. And with that understanding comes the ability to make different choices. But here's the thing. This isn't a quick process. You're not going to read this and suddenly stop repeating your mistakes. You're not going to have one insight that changes everything. What you're going to do, if you take this seriously, is start to become more aware, more honest, more curious about your own mind. And slowly, over time, the patterns will start to lose their grip. Not because you forced them away, but because you understood them deeply enough that they didn't need to exist anymore. Because you addressed the underlying need. Because you increased your capacity to sit with discomfort. Because you stopped needing your trading to prove something about your worth. And this is where it gets really interesting. When you do this work, when you actually break these patterns, something unexpected happens. Trading becomes simpler. Not easier necessarily, but simpler, because you're not carrying all this psychological baggage into every decision. You're not fighting yourself constantly. You're not using trading to manage your emotions, or prove your worth, or avoid uncomfortable truths. You're just trading, looking at the market, making decisions based on your process, managing risk, and when it doesn't work out, you're okay. You don't need to immediately fix it or escape the feeling or prove you're still good enough. You just accept it and move on to the next decision. This is what psychological freedom in trading looks like, and it's available to you, but not through trying harder or being more disciplined. Through understanding yourself more deeply and doing the work to heal the underlying issues that keep pulling you back into the patterns. So, here's what I want you to sit with tonight. What's your pattern? What's the mistake you keep repeating? And more importantly, what do you think it's protecting you from? What would you have to face or feel or accept if you stopped doing it? Don't rush to an answer. Just sit with the question. Let it work on you. Because somewhere in that discomfort, somewhere in your resistance to really looking at this, is the key to everything. That's where your freedom is waiting. Not in some new strategy or technique, but in your willingness to see yourself clearly and to do the hard, honest work of addressing what you find. Your patterns aren't your enemy. They are not proof that you're broken. They're just old strategies that aren't serving you anymore. And once you understand them, once you see what they're trying to do and why they keep showing up, you can thank them for trying to protect you and gently let them go. Not through force, not through shame, but through understanding, through compassion, through the simple recognition that you don't need them anymore, that you're capable of handling whatever they were protecting you from, that you're ready to trade and live from a place of clarity rather than fear. That's the path forward. And it starts with one simple commitment. To stop pretending you don't know what you're doing. To stop acting like these patterns are mysterious. They're not mysterious. They're just unconscious. And the moment you bring them into consciousness, the moment you really see them and understand them, they start to lose their power. Not all at once, but gradually. And that gradual change, that slow transformation from being controlled by your patterns to being in conscious choice, that's what creates a sustainable trading career. That's what creates a life you're proud of. Not perfection, not the absence of mistakes, but the presence of awareness. The willingness to learn. The courage to face what's really happening inside you and to do something about it. If this resonated with you, leave a like and subscribe so we can keep working on this together. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.